You know, when you're making something, anything really, maybe a simple sandwich or assembling some furniture, you've got your bits and pieces, your ingredients or parts, you follow some kind of process, and then, well, hopefully you get the result you wanted. That really, in essence, is what operations management is all about, just, on a business scale. Today, we're taking a deep dive into this really fundamental aspect of how any business, big or small, actually creates the stuff it sells. We've got a really interesting mix of sources, some core definitions, a look inside a global mining giant, South32, and even our own National Postal Service, Australia Post. So our mission today is to get past the textbook stuff and really understand the nuts and bolts of operations management and why it's just so crucial for business success.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you strip it back, operations management is, well, exactly what it sounds like, managing the operations. And as our sources point out, that covers pretty much all the activities managers get involved in to produce either goods or services. Think of it like the core engine of any organization. It's this process of taking various inputs, things like raw materials, labor, tech, even information, and transforming them through a defined set of actions into outputs, the products or services that customers actually want and need.
Okay, so let's get really specific. Like, imagine a bakery. The flour, sugar, eggs, those are your inputs. The baker, the oven, the mixing process, that's the production part. And the yummy cake that comes out, that's the output. Now, every single business, doesn't matter if they're baking cakes or, digging up minerals, faces that same basic challenge. How do we best manage this whole transformation thing? One of our sources puts it quite clearly, actually. It says operations management deals with the design, operation, and improvement of the systems that create and deliver a company's main products and services. Without that creation bit, there's simply no business, right?
Precisely. Yeah, no product, no business. And to see how these ideas actually work in the real world, let's look at South32. This is a huge global company, right?
Yeah.
Mining in metals, different continents. What really stands out is just how central, how vital, efficient operations are to their actual results, their bottom line. Back in 2020, their CEO specifically mentioned that even though the market was challenging, they were still getting positive results. The key, smart, decisive moves in their operations.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting. The reports we looked at, they detail some very specific actions. They actually managed to lower their projected costs across a big chunk of their operations. In Brazil, their alumina production hit record levels, apparently. And in WA, the Worsley alumina site kept up high output. Even in the South Africa manganese business, when prices dropped, they proactively cut back on the more expensive trucking options. So it's not just about digging stuff up. It's about constantly tweaking and optimizing that whole process, making it efficient, profitable, even when the market shifts. What sort of trade-offs do you think they might have faced, though, making those cost-cutting decisions?
Oh, that's a really crucial question. Good point. So while cutting trucking costs in South Africa probably boosted efficiency when prices were low, it might have also introduced some risks. Maybe it meant longer delivery times, or perhaps put more strain on other parts of their logistics chain. These operational decisions, they often involve a really delicate balancing act. And South32 also clearly connects their operational effectiveness to their bigger long-term strategic goals. Things like increasing shareholder value, their investments in exploration, strategic joint ventures like Amber Metals up in Alaska. That's all of making sure they have a strong operational pipeline for the future. How do those big long-term strategic moves then kind of circle back and influence their day-to-day operational decisions?
That's a great point. Yeah. Investing in exploration, for instance, it doesn't just magically create a new mine overnight. It needs a whole new set of operational things to think about. Planning, getting permits, building infrastructure. So those long-term strategic bets, they directly shape the operational challenges and, I guess, opportunities they'll face down the line. And we can't forget the external stuff either. South32 had to stop selling to Russian companies because of the war in Ukraine and the pandemic. Well, that's caused huge disruptions to their global supply chains. Still causing them, probably. These are massive external shocks that force, immediate and pretty significant changes to their operational plans. How does a massive company like South32 even start to navigate those kinds of unpredictable global events from an operational viewpoint?
Well, navigating those kinds of disruptions, it really demands agility, resilience within their operations. They likely had to scramble, find alternative markets quickly, renegotiate contracts, maybe even reconfigure their supply chains quite significantly. It really highlights the need for robust risk management built into operations. Now let's contrast this with Australia Post, a very different beast. Here we have a government-owned service dealing with a totally different kind of output: letters, parcels, mail delivery. But what's fascinating is that they also put a huge emphasis on how important their operations are. Back in 2019, their CEO was stressing how important it was to handle customer inquiries efficiently. And they invested, get this, $423.9 million in upgrading their operational network. What specific challenges do you think a National Postal Service faces that would make them need such a massive operational investment?
Well, the first thing that jumps out is just the sheer volume, isn't it? Handling millions, literally millions, of letters and parcels every single day across a huge country like Australia. That's an enormous logistical headache. So that $423.9 million, it wasn't just plucked out of thin air. It was specifically aimed at things like new automated sorting machines, better tracking systems in the major cities, all timed apparently to get ready for the Christmas rush, the peak demand period. That shows a very clear, proactive approach trying to manage the operational bottlenecks and capacity problems that come with those huge volumes. Did those investments actually, translate into better service? Do we know?
Well, I don't have the specific outcome data from these sources on that particular investment. No. The fact they highlighted it as a key strategic priority strongly suggests they expected, or at least hoped for, significant improvements. Better efficiency, happier customers. What's also interesting with Auspost is their focus on the people side of operations. They invested a lot in customer service training for over 20,000 employees, it says. And they're constantly trying to offer more delivery choices, faster times, innovative products, all those customer-facing improvements. They're built on the foundation of a well-run, efficient operational network behind the scenes. It's about optimizing their processes not just for costs, but also for that customer experience.
So we've seen these two really different organizations, one digging things out of the ground, the other delivering stuff to our doors, both recognizing how critical operations are. Now, our source material highlights two key concepts here: efficiency and effectiveness. Let's dig into this a bit. Effectiveness, as I understand it, that's about achieving your goals, right? So for South32, maybe hitting production targets. For Australia Post, delivering mail reliably, on time. Is that roughly it?
Yeah, that's a pretty solid way to think about effectiveness, basically. Did you achieve the desired outcome? Yes or no? Efficiency, though, that focuses more on how you get there. Are you using your resources smartly? Minimizing waste, whether that's time, materials, energy, whatever. Think back to South32 cutting those trucking costs. That was clearly a move aimed at boosting efficiency. How might that increased efficiency then help their overall effectiveness in, say, meeting their production goals?
Well, by lowering their cost per ton, or whatever unit they use, they become more profitable on each unit they produce.
Right.
This improved profitability then makes it easier to hit their overall financial targets, which definitely contributes to their effectiveness as a business. And this leads us nicely to productivity, which our source defines as the ratio of output to input. So if South32 can mine more ore with the same amount of labor and equipment, or if Australia Post can process more parcels with the same staff and machinery, that's higher productivity. And higher productivity usually means lower costs and less wasted resources.
Exactly. Spot on. And when a business can consistently improve its productivity and the quality of its goods or services, it naturally becomes more competitive in the market. Business competitiveness, as we see in the sources, is essentially that ability to offer products or services that are just as good as, or hopefully better than, the competition. Better in terms of price, quality, and speed of delivery, all areas directly shaped by how well a company manages its operations.
It's fascinating looking back at history, too. That "did you know" bit mentions Henry Ford's assembly line in 1913, cutting the time to assemble a car from over 700 hours down to just 1.5 hours. I mean, that's an almost unbelievable jump in efficiency, all driven by fundamentally changing the production process. What do you think was the key insight behind that innovation? What made it have such a dramatic impact?
Ford's real genius, I think, was in the specialization of labor and creating that continuous flow of work. Instead of one person building a whole car, which took ages, each worker did one specific repetitive task as the car chassis moved past them on the line. This division of labor massively increased how efficient each individual worker was, and it streamlined the entire production system. That's what led to that incredible reduction in assembly time. Now let's bring this back to the core objectives of a business today. Our source mentions that for most businesses, the #1 goal is to maximize profit. How does effective operations management directly help achieve that profit goal?
It seems pretty direct, doesn't it? Efficient operations mean lower production costs. Simple as that. Lower costs, assuming you sell at the same price, directly mean higher profits. And successful operations, like we've seen with South32 and Australia Post, they also lead to happier customers. Happier customers can drive more sales, which lets the business achieve other important goals too, like growing their market share or fulfilling social responsibilities. That's especially relevant for Australia Post as a government service. And ultimately, providing a good return for their investors or owners.
It's also important to remember that how operations management is handled can look really different depending on the business's size and structure. In a tiny owner-run business, the owner might be doing everything, deeply involved in every operational detail. But as businesses get bigger, you usually see dedicated operations departments pop up. Specialized roles, senior managers, people whose job it is to align those operational strategies with the big picture business objectives. How crucial is that alignment, do you think, between operations and the overall business strategy for long-term success?
Oh, it seems absolutely critical. Yeah. If your operations aren't actually set up to support your main business goals, you're kind of, well, working against yourself, aren't you? Our source even has a neat table showing this alignment really clearly. Like if the business objective is increased profit margin, a key operational objective becomes reduce costs.
Hmm.
And a strategy like implementing just-in-time inventory management could be one way to achieve that cost reduction. It's all interconnected.
Exactly. Or, another example, if the goal is to grab more market share, the operational focus might shift towards improving product quality. And the strategy to get there could involve putting in really rigorous quality control checks at every stage of production.
Yeah.
It's like a constant feedback loop,
Mm.
between the high-level business ambitions and the day-to-day stuff happening on the ground in operations. So what really makes operations management distinct then, different from other management functions like finance or HR?
Well, as our source makes pretty clear, it's that specific focus on the transformation process itself, the actual creation and delivery of the goods or services. It's not just managing people or money generally. It's specifically overseeing how those inputs get turned into outputs.
Right. And the role of the modern operations manager really reflects that unique focus. Especially in bigger companies, they often hold quite senior management positions. They might lead whole teams of managers looking after different bits of the operation production, warehousing, quality control, logistics. It's become a really strategic role that directly impacts the company's ability to deliver value to customers and ultimately hit its business targets.
Okay, so to sort of wrap things up then, this deep dive has really hammered home that operations management is way more than just some behind-the-scenes admin task. It's the absolute core function that lets any business actually produce what it sells, whether that's digging up minerals like South32 or delivering mail like Australia Post. It really is all about taking inputs and transforming them efficiently and effectively to meet both the business's own goals and, crucially, the needs of the customer. And as we've seen with those two examples, the basic principles are vital for success across hugely different industries.
Precisely.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the sheer complexity hiding behind even the simplest products and services we use every day. Thinking about all this, what are some of the less obvious operational challenges you imagine different businesses might be wrestling with right now? Maybe in areas like, say, sustainability, or coping with rapid technological change, or managing these increasingly complicated global supply chains. And how do you think they might be innovating, adapting their operational strategies behind the scenes to try and tackle these evolving demands? It's a fascinating area, always changing, always problem solving.